can't think of a better panel to start a conversation about one of the most important commercial and political relationships in the world than this one. Ian has set the stage in somewhat dark hues of where we stand in the world today.
It's Ian, so.
Right. But I think here we're going to talk solutions and really get down to practicalities of what Canada and the US can do together to shape this world order, a very modest task for this morning. We are here with Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly and Senator Chris Coons, who's also known as the Biden whisperer in Washington. So it's almost as if we had the commander-in-chief here. I want to start maybe with something a little bit more upbeat and ask each of you, starting with you, Minister Joly, is give us an example in the last 6 months, perhaps, of where the US-Canada partnership has done something concretely good that make the world a better place.
Well, I have many ideas in mind. And of course, Ian referred to Ukraine. We've been working a lot on the Indo-Pacific. But concretely speaking, I think that together we were able to finally get a transitional government in Haiti with a very competent new prime minister. And we worked together through the CARICOM to make that happen. And I think this is pivotal for our own hemisphere, for the people of Haiti, and for the security also in our own hemisphere. And I think also that we've been able to work to fund the multinational force that will be led by Kenya, and that many CARICOM countries, and including also some African countries, including Benin, are interested in joining. And therefore, I think that will be helpful in terms of how we can show concretely how we work, but also show the world that we can be there for the better good.
Senator Coons?
So I couldn't agree more. Our partnership in trying to bring some stability and order to Haiti is critical. The restored funding for UNRWA by Canada is enormously helpful. We are the world's largest humanitarian donor, but for our internal political reasons, we've barred any funding for UNRWA going forward. So in the continuing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we need to be partners in order to sustain the UN humanitarian system. We're also friend-shoring at scale. We're demonstrating what a partnership in terms of combating climate and reindustrializing North America can mean. There have been incredible announcements just in the last year of new large-scale industrial investments in the United States and Canada, right here in Ontario, electric vehicles, battery plants, new manufacturing opportunities. So there's things that are concretely happening for our communities and our jobs in North America, and things we're doing overseas. Last, our partnership in continuing to sustain Ukraine's fight against Russia. That is a core values and resources commitment where we keep at this fight.
Let's stay there. Today, President Zelensky in Berlin said, the time has come for Ukraine's partners to give it all the weapons it needs to push Russia out of Ukraine. Agree?
Well, it's fundamental that we do more, first and foremost. And just to go back to your last question, Matthew, of course we do a lot, and Chris was referring to that. We're integrated economically, and so the fact that we're building new supply chains, particularly in EVs, and we've been able to work together is fundamental. But to your question now, what I would say is the issue when you look at Ukraine, you have to address the crisis now. We need to make sure that there are more air defense systems. Canada has bought one from the US. It needs to be delivered. I know that there is this German initiative to bring more air defense systems also to Ukraine. That will make sure that we can protect key cities, Odessa including, and others. And we need to make sure that weapons are sent, because we now have the $1 billion package of the EU, our own funding. We also have, of course, the American funding, but the issue of weapon delivery is at the core of Ukrainians being able to deliver on the front line and basically win the war. So that would be my answer to your question.
But if you read in between the lines of what President Zelensky is saying is frustration that you, meaning Canada, US, NATO, are not giving Ukraine all the weapons and the power to use them that it needs to win against Russia. You know, that the Biden White House has really kind of dripping both supplies. Only last month allowed them to strike, you know, a couple dozen kilometers within Russia, but not beyond. Should we be more? Should there be a more aggressive posture vis-a-vis?
Look, I respect deeply President Biden's balance, his concern about the repeated threats by Putin to use tactical nuclear weapons, about the ways in which Putin doesn't just once or twice, briefly or casually make threats, but directly, repeatedly, aggressively. Over the arc of this, I think one of the key transitions is towards reviving Ukraine's domestic weapons production capacity. I was just in the Indo-Pacific. The United States has billions of dollars of arms sales to Taiwan that are on the books, but that won't be delivered for years. What we're learning is that our defense industrial base needs to be revived and modernized, particularly with regards to munitions. Having Ukraine able to manufacture in Ukraine the munitions that it needs for this war is a key piece of it. And the $60 billion that has now been appropriated by Congress and is being deployed by the Biden administration, and the full range of weapons. Look, we're 300-kilometer ATACMS, F-16s, M1A1 Abrams tanks. I mean, we are deploying the most sophisticated conventional weaponry available.
And Matthew, if I can follow up on that, I think Putin has no red line. And I really think that Ukraine is the front line of Europe, and afterwards it's NATO territory. So I think we should keep that strategic ambiguity. We should not be clearly showing what are our red lines to Russia. That's where I think fundamentally I agree with Biden. I also agree with Macron. And I think also that while we are preparing the Washington summit, and Washington needs of NATO, and Washington needs to be a success, we're signing lots of long-term security commitments amongst many, at least at this point, 20 NATO allies, which are showing basically our own commitment. We have done so. The US is working on it. All the G7 have signed security commitments. It shows that we will be there in the long run. And that's also a message that we're sending to the Kremlin.
But are we ambiguous about what we want the end result to be? What is the end outcome?
Well, we want Ukraine to win.
Victory.
Yes.
Victory, okay.
I don't think there's been a lot of ambiguity in the United States in terms of President Biden's public statements, his willingness to actually go to Kyiv in person, to not just say we're with you, but to be with them. Our challenge is our domestic politics and the extent to which isolationism has reemerged in the MAGA wing of the Republican Party. There are Republican leaders like Senator McConnell in the Senate who have been fiercely committed to the defense of Ukraine and to arming them with everything they need. But there's other voices that delayed us by months. And that was a critical strategic challenge. I'm concerned now about what might happen in Europe, particularly in France, should Le Pen win the snap elections or her party win. So there are concerns in our overall coalition in support of Ukraine. But let's not forget that what President Biden did was to work with our closest allies and partners and assemble 50 countries around the world to provide support for Ukrainian refugees, funding for the Ukrainian government, weapons for the Ukrainian fight. This is a remarkable, sustained, broad alliance in support of what Ukrainians decide is their ultimate objective in terms of regaining sovereign territory.
Speaking of strategic ambiguity, which has been a long-standing U.S. policy on Taiwan and China, you were just back from Taiwan, Senator. Is Taiwan ready, and are we ready for something that Chairman Xi has said quite openly will probably happen in the next 3 or 4 years, that China will go into Taiwan? And to what degree, let's just start there. Is it ready militarily? Are we ready militarily?
We're doing everything we can to be prepared for that possibility. It is genuinely challenging logistically. because the distances in the Indo-Pacific are vast. Having our network of alliances in the Indo-Pacific prepared for this, clear-eyed about this, has been the major accomplishment, I think, in the region of the Biden administration. Having a summit of the South Korean, Japanese, and American heads of state at Camp David that produced significant forward progress, having the AUKUS partnership that is a real engagement between the Australians, the British, and the United States, having the Quad summit, every one of these is another step forward in a positive way in terms of reinforcing preparedness to defend a free and open Indo-Pacific. But there are some real challenges that remain in terms of the systems that the Taiwanese have wanted to acquire and the preparedness of the Taiwanese people. Yeah. But nothing has energized and focused them like Russia's aggression against Ukraine and the extent to which Russia is looking, as Ian mentioned, to the DPRK and to Iran as their partners in their fight.
Mr. Joly, if I can come to you, I mean, friendshoring sounds really nice, but at the end of the day, hard power is what tends to shape outcomes in the world. And Canada...
So that's your assessment. We believe in a rules-based order where rules must be followed, and small and big countries have the same rules that they have to follow. So, but I hear you.
But rules need to be enforced too, which is the other side of the coin. And which brings me to my question here, which is Canada spends about 1.4% of its GDP on defense. There are, I think, only 5 countries in NATO's 32 that spend less, including Belgium and Luxembourg. How can Canada be a serious partner to the U.S. in every sense if it's not a serious military power? And I say this, by the way, having been to Halifax multiple times and know Canada's proud history in supporting the alliance and its role in both world wars.
Well, Matthew, have you read our last defense policy update?
Very, very closely, yes, of course.
So you should write about it. This new defense policy update brings us to 1.76, but that doesn't include the next procurement we have to do on submarines. And I'm convinced that we can be on a path to 2%. And I know the Minister of Defense is working on this, and more is coming to that regard. I think that the defense policy update created a form of surprise amongst our allies. Why? Because it was all about the Canadian Arctic and the defense of North America. And so in that sense, we want to make sure that we're sending a message to the world that we know that climate change is having an impact in the Arctic, that lots of countries are turning their eyes to the north, and we need to make sure that we're addressing this security threat. And I think also that for a long time, Canada has been able to prosper under this peace dividend following the Second World War, being next to a fantastic close ally. But I think that Canadians are now understanding that the world has changed, and we need to invest more in defense. And we need to increase our defense spending. And I'm absolutely in favor of doing that because we have to be ready for turbulent times. And you heard it through, of course, what we're talking about today, but what Ian just mentioned beforehand.
Senator, how much does Canada's spending currently handicap its ability to support the U.S. and NATO or even in the region, as you started off with Haiti?
I think what matters most is the trajectory, the intentionality you just heard from the minister and that we've heard at a number of levels across governments. First, second, the values that we share and the opportunity we now have, particularly in the Arctic, for us to develop the next generation of sensing, of engagement, a shared and joint engagement in patrol, using submarines, and in refreshing and updating both the radar system and our ability to intercept. Look, we had a wake-up, both countries, with the Chinese balloon episode that I think made the average Canadian, the average American go, well, hang on a minute, we're not really prepared for such a relatively simple, conventional threat to our airspace and our security. I think it may be hard at times for the average Canadian or American to grasp the significance or consequence of pledges made years ago about percentages of GDP. What matters is the size and capabilities of our forces. We are far behind where we need to be in icebreakers, I think Canada really can help us lead the way on that. We need Canada's partnership in peacekeeping and in foreign deployments. And I had the chance a number of years ago to visit Latvia and to see the Canadian-led regional team that is NATO's real presence in the Baltic. So look, whether it's the Haiti mission, whether it's the Arctic, whether it's the procurement of submarines, whether it's training or actual deployments in Latvia and elsewhere, I think we have a strong values-based partnership. And if we can see a path towards 2% that's credible, that will go a long way towards strengthening our defense relationship.
So there's a couple of big events. There's an election down south. There may be an election here in the next, well, has to be here in the next 12 months. But the other big event that's already come up this morning is that the USMCA, which is really the engine of sort of North American economic growth the last couple of years, is coming up for renewal a year after. The question I had is really more about Mexico, which is not on stage, but obviously is the M in that acronym, is as you saw Mexico pass Canada as America's biggest trading partner, as trade with China seemed to go down, to what degree are you worried that what's happening is that Mexico is becoming a backdoor to Chinese trade and Chinese commerce coming into North America? And could that sort of be something that could kind of trip up the renegotiation in 2 years' time? Maybe, Mr. Joly, I could start with
Chris
you.
first.
Maybe,
Look, the U.S.-Mexico relationship is far more fraught than the U.S.-Canada relationship, both because of migration and because of security issues. The last time I was in Mexico City meeting with President Lopez Obrador, he is angry. His whole cabinet was upset about the flow of guns from the United States into Mexico and the flow of money that is fueling a lot of the cartels. Obviously, the average American is very upset about the flow of fentanyl and the flow of migrants. And we have now, after the election of a new president, the opportunity to expand and renew some of our partnerships. There are some real challenges from a values perspective. Protecting North American innovation from Chinese theft, making sure that our intellectual property is protected, and figuring out how we're going to build out an integrated energy system and a semiconductor supply chain, and then protect the inventions, whether it's quantum computing or other work related to artificial intelligence, is critical. And there really are some challenges in terms of how actively and aggressively the PRC is trying to engage Mexico. So I'm hoping President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum will be a great partner and will help strengthen this North American opportunity. I also think we need to do more in the United States to welcome and embrace promising Mexican students to our universities and to help integrate in a way that we are with Canada. We have binational unions. We have significant industrial engagement and energy engagement. We haven't really woven Mexico into the United States, into North America the same way. We can and we should.
Mr. Joly, is Mexico the backdoor for China? That was the one waiting for you.
So first and foremost, we think that we have a positive relationship with Mexico, and we can do more. We've had some issues on the questions of immigration, and we were able to land at a good place in terms of imposing visas to Mexicans. And at the same time, I think that following the last NALs, what was clear is that we could work with Mexico to make sure that we could invest in their manufacturing work, and at the same time that the national security lenses that we have in Canada and in the US regarding countries such as China could be also a way that Mexico could go forward in order to have this integrated supply chain in North America that is actually safe. Right. And that's, we have a legislation in Canada, it's called the Canada Investment Act, and Mexico doesn't have that. And they were interested in having actually our template because they don't have any tools to stop foreign investments which are not aligned with their own national security, and they have a tendency to nationalize assets instead. And that's what they did with a Chinese lithium mine. Yeah. A year ago. I had the chance to meet Claudia Sheinbaum while she was the mayor of Mexico, and I will be going to Mexico very soon to make sure that we have a positive relationship. Of course, we want to be able to partner with the American administration, and we have in line the US elections.
One last thing I did think is important to raise here is, maybe starting with you, Mr. Joly, is do you think the US should be doing more to pressure Israel toward a ceasefire or to reduce the civilian toll of the operations in Gaza?
Well, the Middle East is the toughest issue on earth. It's definitely having an impact here at home with a rise of anti-Semitism. We saw also recently also in this beautiful province of Ontario acts of Islamophobia. So it's really rising tensions. I think the Biden proposal is fundamental. I also think that the UN Security Council motion yesterday, embracing this proposal for a ceasefire is also important. So now you have all countries that will be pushing forward to it. And I think the Netanyahu government needs to abide by it, and Hamas, which we don't talk to, needs also to abide by it. And I think that it's fundamental also for our own social cohesion here at home. And I think, I can't talk about the US, but I think it's fundamental also for what's going down south, particularly in light of the elections.
I will have failed in my job as a journalist on the stage to not ask the co-chair of the Biden election campaign something about, I remember a Canadian friend once told me that living in Canada is like living above the loudest house party in the world. Let's maybe close with that. There's a report in my publication this morning about a government think tank that did raise the prospect of a civil war in America down the road.
We did that before. Yeah. I don't think we'll do that again. It was a painful and difficult chapter. I have an ancestor who fought in the New York 160th, and a bipartisan delegation from the Senate recently went to the battlefield of Antietam, which was the single bloodiest day in all of American history. So I know there is a lot of concern about the possibility of conflict. We do have the best armed citizenry on earth, which is not necessarily a great thing. But I am optimistic. I am optimistic that we will get through this election season, that President Biden will be reelected, that the results of the election will be broadly accepted, and that the former president will be returned to his place in the private sector and given the opportunity to contribute in that way. So I've campaigned for our president all over the country in the last 6 months, and I'm optimistic that he will be reelected, given the very strong record he has of delivering real results for the American people.